Ethan Miller receives a mysterious box on his doorstep. Inside is a wad of $10,000 in cash and a strange note. Your good deeds deserve good things in return. But he had no idea who had sent him this gift or why it had come to him. Memories of the previous week slowly came flooding back, the image of the miserable homeless woman and the last $5 bill he had given her. Did someone see that action? Or did fate decide to give him a miracle? Welcome to Kindness Stories, where small acts create big miracles. Today, we will explore a surprising story of kindness and miraculous responses. Listen in and prepare for an emotional journey you will never forget. Pale morning sunlight filtered through the old curtains into the small, cramped room. Ethan Miller, a 38-year-old man, lay on an old bed that creaked when he turned over. The ceiling had yellow water stains on it, a sign of recent heavy rains. He squinted at the ceiling and sighed when he heard familiar sounds from outside. The honking of car horns, the shrill cries of street vendors, and the arguing of a couple in the apartment next door. Ethan lives in a working-class neighborhood on the edge of town. It's a place of narrow alleys, houses stacked on top of each other, and neighbors who are busy doing manual labor to make ends meet. Ethan's life isn't much better. He used to be a production worker in an auto parts factory. The job was steady, the pay wasn't high, but it was enough to get by. But then the factory downsized due to the recession, and Ethan was on the layoff list. 3 months of unemployment passed. His unemployment benefits were depleted and his savings were gone. Ethan interviewed at several places but was turned down with excuses like, "We need someone with more technical skills," or "We found a more suitable candidate." Ethan's eyes drifted to the small kitchen table where several bills were stacked. One yellow note stood out above the rest, a notice that the electricity would be shut off if payment wasn't made within 3 days. Deliver batteries. Ethan sat up, rubbing his face to clear away the fatigue. He walked to the refrigerator, opened it, and looked inside. There was only 1 egg and half a loaf of bread, which was a little hard. "Exactly $5 left," he muttered, looking at the folded bill in his wallet. Ethan knew that the $5 had to be spent wisely. He thought about buying some cheap food, maybe a pack of instant noodles or some potatoes. But as he held the bill in his hand, he felt its invisible weight, a weight not only from its material value, but also from the anxiety weighing on his shoulders. "I'll probably go to the convenience store and buy some noodles," he thought, throwing on his worn-out jacket and heading out the door. Ethan walked slowly down the familiar street, his worn shoes making a clicking sound as they hit the pavement. The sky was overcast, the air carrying a chill of late autumn. Leaves littered the sidewalk, swirling in the breeze, like his own life, hazy and uncontrollable. Passing by the convenience store, Ethan paused for a few seconds to look through the glass. Behind the glass, the shelves were filled with bags of cookies, instant noodles, and colorful bottles of soda. The $5 in his hand could buy him a few packs of noodles or even a cheap hamburger. "At least I'll have something to eat tonight," he muttered, about to enter the store. But when he turned around, his eyes suddenly caught a figure sitting on the sidewalk. It was a homeless woman, about 50 years old, wearing a thin, tattered coat. Her hair was messy, her face was haggard, her cracked hands were shaking in the cold. In front of her was an empty paper cup. Next to it was a scribbled sign, "I'm hungry, please help." Ethan stopped, his eyes wavering. The woman didn't look at him. She just lowered her head, her eyes seemingly losing the light of hope. A voice rang out in Ethan's head. "It's none of my business. I'm in trouble myself. I can't help others." He turned and continued walking toward the store, but after a few steps his heart sank. The image of the woman appeared clearly in his mind, her shaking hands, her sad eyes. "She must be worse than me," he thought. Ethan bowed his head, looking at the $5 in his hand. He had told himself that no matter how hard it was, he would never let himself become heartless. Kindness doesn't have to wait for the right time. Ethan turned and walked over to the homeless woman. He sat down next to her and gently placed a $5 bill in her paper cup. The woman looked up, her eyes staring at him in surprise. "Have a good meal tonight." Ethan smiled softly. "Everyone deserves a better day." The woman looked at him for a few seconds, her eyes gradually filling with tears. She stammered, You're so kind, thank you. Ethan just nodded. He stood up and left without looking back. Not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid that if he stayed another second, he would regret giving away the last of his money. His stomach churned, but he felt relieved. "I don't have much, but I still have more than her." Ethan continued walking, this time not entering the convenience store. He returned to his apartment, his mind wandering. Even though he had nothing to eat, he felt something strange, a sense of relief and peace. "Maybe I'll just eat half a loaf of stale bread tonight," Ethan thought. When he got home, he opened the door and walked into the empty apartment. He sat down on the chair, looking out the window with a distant look in his eyes. "Will anyone out there help me? Probably not," he chuckled. Outside, small raindrops began to fall, tapping gently on the glass window. Ethan pulled the blanket around himself, feeling the chill of the evening seep into the room. The last $5 was gone, but Ethan had no regrets. At least someone will get a full meal tonight. Ethan's eyes slowly closed. The atmosphere was quiet. The sound of rain still fell steadily. Little did he know that tomorrow his life would change forever. Parts 1 and 2 are complete. If you need any adjustments to the content, tone, or additional details, I'm happy to help. The next morning, Ethan awoke to a bright light shining through the old curtains. He stretched, his head still heavy from his fitful sleep. Yesterday had been a long day, and today he knew would be no better. Ethan sat up, his eyes scanning the cramped room with its shabby furniture. His stomach growled like a bell. Yesterday's half loaf of bread was gone, and now he had nothing left to eat. Ethan walked over to the kitchen table and picked up a stack of old bills: electricity, water, and rent. The bold red words, "overdue," made his breath hitch. He had never felt so down. The smell of cooking came to mind as he dived into the pile of cookbooks, but he didn't put his gun out. "I have to find a job. I have to do something," he told himself, but then sighed. For the past 3 months, every time Ethan has tried to apply for a job, he has come back looking sad. No one wants a 38-year-old manual laborer with no technical skills. He sat down on the chair, propped his elbows on the table, and rubbed his forehead. A feeling of helplessness surrounded him like a cold mist. But just then, a sudden sound came from the front door. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan looked up, slightly startled. He had no visitors. He wasn't expecting anyone. Who would be knocking on the door this early in the morning? Ethan stood up and carefully walked towards the door. His bare feet touched the cold floor. He peeked through the peephole, but saw no one. He opened the door slowly, his heart pounding. Right on the doorstep was a square brown cardboard box about the size of a shoebox. "What is this?" Ethan frowned, bending down to pick up the box. There was no sender's name, no address. The box wasn't very heavy, but when he shook it gently, he heard rustling inside. His heart suddenly beat faster. The first thought that came to his mind, someone must have misplaced something. Ethan walked into the house, closed the door, and placed the box on the table. He stood there for a moment, staring at it. Is it ever a scam? He carefully used a small knife to cut the sealing tape around the edges. His heart was pounding, partly with curiosity. partly with anxiety about what might be waiting inside. The last layer of tape was cut away. Ethan slowly opened the lid of the box. His eyes widened in surprise. He looked down at Paul's tunis. Inside was a wad of cash held together with a rubber band. The green bills glinted before his eyes. Ethan blinked a few times, as if afraid he was dreaming. "No way!" he exclaimed. He shakily picked up the stack of money, stroked each note, and counted slowly and carefully. 100, 200, 500, 1,000. A total of $10,000. How long would this go on for? Jess asked himself. How much farther before he gave up? "How could I possibly finish now?" she said. "How could I go on?" Underneath the stack of money was a small piece of paper, a white sheet of paper with a brief, handwritten line. "Your good deeds deserve good things in return. Always believe that." Ethan's eyes widened, his heart pounding like a drum. He sat down in his chair, his hand shaking as he clutched the piece of paper. Who did this?" He looked around the room as if someone was hiding in some corner to see his reaction. But there was no one there, just him and a box of $10,000 in cash. For the first moment, Ethan just sat there motionless. His heart was beating so fast he could feel it pounding in his chest. He held the money tightly, as if afraid that if he let go, it would all disappear like a dream. 32. "Am I dreaming?" Ethan muttered, then pinched himself. But he managed to hold on once he was thrown onto his back. The sharp pain in his arm made him realize that it was all real. The $10,000 was right in front of him. Ethan's mind was in turmoil. So many questions flooded his mind. Who sent it? Why did it send it to me? Is it the wrong person? Should I call the police? But then, his eyes fell on the piece of paper with the familiar words, "Your good deeds deserve good returns." At that moment, a memory flashed through Ethan's mind, the image of a homeless woman with a haggard face and teary eyes as she received a $5 bill from him. He stopped his speech and turned to give her proper donation in a pile. It was labeled, "Auntie Plates." Is that her? Oh, the thought made Ethan's heart clench. It couldn't be. He suddenly remembered what he had said to her. Everyone deserves a better day. And now, here he was, sitting with $10,000 in front of him, a surprise gift he'd never dreamed of. "Hunsky," he managed to say. "Hunsky. Kindness returns to me, but who cares about me?" The thought touched Ethan. A tear rolled down his cheek. Ethan had always thought his life was a series of injustices and despairs, but now he felt something greater, a newfound belief that kindness is never meaningless. "Lori, some of these people never had anything to be grateful for. Life can be beautiful." With $10,000 in hand, Ethan's first thought was to pay off his debt. He sat down at his desk, opened each bill, and took out his calculator to do the math. Electricity, water, rent, I can pay it all. He felt relieved, as if a huge boulder had been lifted from his shoulders. With the remaining money, he could buy food, repair some things around the house, and most importantly, find a new job. For the first time in months, Ethan felt like he was in control of his life. "I will not waste this opportunity." He wiped away his tears and took a deep breath. "But I won't forget this. I will continue to do good, even if I have nothing in my hands." Before going to bed that night, Ethan sat by the window, looking out at the quiet streets. Raindrops pattered on the glass, but this time he didn't feel cold. "Thank you, someone. Thank you for reminding me that kindness always counts." Ethan closed his eyes and smiled. Tomorrow, he will start his life again, and this time, he will continue to sow seeds of kindness. In the following days, Ethan's life began to change dramatically. With the $10,000, he paid off all his outstanding bills. The electricity, water, and rent were all paid in full. For the first time in 3 months, he was no longer threatened by debt notices. Ethan carefully used the remaining money to buy some food and necessities for his apartment. This time, the refrigerator was not empty. Fresh loaves of bread, eggs, milk, and some fresh vegetables filled the small kitchen with life. He also bought a nice suit for upcoming job interviews. Ethan had thought his life was at a dead end, but now he felt he had a chance to start over. On Saturday morning, Ethan sat by the window sipping a cup of hot coffee. The sunlight gently touched his face. The coffee no longer tasted bitter. This time, he could really taste the taste of hope. "I can't waste this opportunity," Ethan thought to himself. A week later, Ethan decided to go out and look for a job. Although he had not yet received a formal interview, he applied to 3 companies. As he passed the old street where he had met the homeless woman the week before, his feet stopped. She is not there anymore. The empty paper cup and the sign that read, "I'm hungry, please help," were gone. Ethan looked around, searching for the familiar figure of his grandmother, but saw no one. A little worry rose in his heart. Where did she go? Is she okay? He continued walking a little further, looking back a few times, but saw no sign of the woman. Maybe she found better accommodation, he thought to himself, hoping that she had received help from someone. He continued walking towards the nearby park. The weather was unusually nice today. The warm sunlight shone on the lush green grass. The chirping of birds filled the air. In the meanwhile, just as he was about to step past a wooden bench, Ethan suddenly stopped. He recognized a familiar figure sitting there. Is a homeless woman. But there was something different this time. She looked neater. She was wearing a warm gray coat. Her hair was slicked back, and there was no paper cup beside her. In her hand was a paper bag containing food from a nearby bakery. Ethan stood there, stunned. She was no longer the miserable woman he had known. She seemed calm, even a little stronger than before. Ethan hesitated for a few seconds, then decided to move closer. "Hello," he said, his voice warm. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up, her eyes meeting Ethan's. A small smile appeared on her face, but there was something like recognition in her eyes. "Hello," she replied, her voice low but friendly. "I'm fine. Thanks for asking." She hung up and sat back, smiling. She was so happy to have reclaimed her life. Last week I saw you sitting on the sidewalk. I gave you $5. Do you remember?" The woman looked up at him, her eyes shining with affection. She nodded slightly. "And I remember." Ethan smiled, a sense of relief rising in his heart. Are you okay? You look different today." The woman looked at him for a moment, then tilted her head slightly toward the bag of food on the chair. "Yes," she said. "Help yourself," said Lupek. "There was a kind person who helped me. Thanks to you, I had a warm meal that day. After that, I went to the homeless support center. They helped me get a temporary place to stay. All thanks to you." Ethan was silent. He felt something warm spread in his chest. "I don't do much, ma'am, just $5. The woman chuckled. Sometimes all it takes is $5 to change someone's day. That sentence echoed in Ethan's head, reminding him of the words on the piece of paper placed with the $10,000. Your good deeds deserve good returns. A thought flashed through his mind. Could it be she was the one who sent the money? Do you know if someone left a gift on my doorstep?" Ethan asked, trying to hide his suspicion. The woman looked at him, smiled slightly, but said nothing. She just shrugged, then picked up her bag and stood up. Sometimes life rewards us in the most unexpected ways. she said, her voice soft but meaningful. "Remember that, Ethan." Ethan's eyes widened, surprised that she knew his name. "Wait, how do you know my name?" he asked, taking a step forward. The woman just smiled, not answering. She turned and walked slowly down the stone path. Ethan stood still, his eyes following her figure until she disappeared behind the trees. On the way home, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about that encounter. Everything seemed to connect. The mysterious money, the note, the homeless woman. It all made sense. Just one small act of kindness can change someone's life, Ethan muttered. But the old cliché can't get old dust in the hole, he added sourly. All of us have failed that. He realized he might never know who left the box on his doorstep. Maybe it was the homeless woman, or maybe someone else who witnessed his actions. But that doesn't matter anymore. The important thing is that faith in human kindness has returned. Sometimes you don't need to know who helped you. You just need to know that when you sow the seeds of kindness, life will know how to respond to you. That evening, Ethan sat by the window, quietly watching the rain fall. His heart was no longer as heavy as before. He had learned an important lesson. Kindness never goes astray. And when you give it away, it comes back to you in the most unexpected ways. Nagas. Ethan's eyes looked into the distance, where the streetlights were shining brightly. Tomorrow, I will continue a new journey. A journey with a heart full of kindness and faith. Today's story shows us that even a small act of kindness can change someone's life, and sometimes our own. If you've ever hesitated to help others, remember that kindness never goes astray. Don't forget to like, share, and follow Kindness Stories to spread more miracles like this. Thank you for joining us on our journey to sow seeds of love. See you in the next stories, where kindness always finds its way back.